afternoon, nice to see you all. We're almost at spring, except that we've got our winter coats on again today. A little bit of a tease at the beginning of the week and now chill, but I'm told that we're going to be backed up to, I think, 17 or 20 degrees by Saturday. So I'm a spring girl, so I'm really looking forward to this, to some nice weather. But welcome to our Boss Camp, our Empowered Senior Speakers Series for the month of March. Welcome back to those who have been here several times over. We appreciate of your participation, your attendance, and your support. And a warm welcome to those of you who are here for the first time today. Just show of hands, how many new people do we have? Oh, just a few. Well, that's okay, but for the benefit of our newcomers, again, warm welcome. I am Marion Gord, and I am a real estate agent, real estate broker, actually, here in Burlington, and I specialize in working with older adults. So everyone else here has heard this before, you're gonna hear it again. When I work with real estate, in terms of my business, the real estate is really one small piece of the work that I do. The rest of it is around life transitions, because when you're working with older adults and you're facing a change in your life, that's really what's important. And it's not the real estate. Certainly I focus on, I do a great job on the real estate, but in helping my clients through that life transition is how this actually came to be, because I realized that there were lots of questions, lots of questions unanswered. There's lots of support in the community, but you're not really sure where to go, who to go to, how to get it. And so hence the session, the Empowered Senior Speaker Series. Just want to acknowledge and thank the educational partners who come by every month and support us. They're here for the taking, for your taking. They're here to answer any questions that you have. They're supportive. What are you laughing at over here? For the taking? Oh, sorry. Well, okay. They're here for you. To answer any questions and to support you in any way that they can. And I can assure you that if you don't need them today, perhaps you'll need them in the future. And if you need somebody or some service that is not represented here, one of us for sure can connect you to the right people. So just, I'll let them introduce themselves. We'll start over here with Kim.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kim Routledge, and I am the consultant for Vistamere Retirement Residence in South Oakville. And we are a small community retirement residence of 94 suites, ranging from studios to 2 bedrooms. And my job every day is to meet with the families and help support them navigating through their preliminary research and trying to find the right fit for eventually making the big decision for making a move to retirement living. So I have lots of information here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Sunnix, and I'm a funeral director with Smith's Funeral Home, which is just down the street here. Hi. So my specialty at the funeral home is I do pre-planning with families. So I sit with you, walk you through kind of what happens at the time of death. We talk about palliative care, we talk about power of attorney, we talk about wills, executors, all of that. I just had a lady change her will after sitting with me, so that was really good because she had it written in a way that was not going to be helpful to her family. And we pre-plan things so that your family doesn't have to make those choices in an emotional state. I also help afterwards with executor checklists, applying for CPP benefits, and knowing as much as I can about the government, which is a lot. So I am here to help, and anytime you come and sit with me, it is a free cup of coffee, so there's no charge.
I'm Elizabeth. I'm a clinical leader and nurse in Burlington with Bayshore Home Health. And we use the neighborhood health teams model to deliver nurse-led home care. So that means we have PSWs and caregivers that can help you with any and all of your daily tasks around the home. But you also do get support from a registered nurse here in Burlington. I'm the nurse that you'd be speaking to for any health concerns, health issues, coordinating, working with your family doctor, things like that.
Hello, my name is Meredith Joachim. I am a hearing instrument specialist with Hearing Well Matters, just around the other side on Maple Avenue there. We do everything from wax management to testing hearing, fitting hearing devices, and aftercare follow-ups. So anything to do with your ears or your hearing, I am happy to help.
Is this, oh, it is. Hi, my name is Kelly. I'm here with my partner Pam. We are with Compassionate Care Collaborators. We are end-of-life doulas. So anything concerning end of life, from advanced care planning to sitting by the bedside in the hospital to planning a funeral, we can help you with all of those things. And Pam is based in Burlington. I'm in Mississauga. So come and talk to us afterwards. We've got lots of resources for you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeanette Bach. My company name is Fluid Senior Transitions, and I'm an elder care planner. So I help people through crisis situations. I actually helped a lady the other day. She needed a respite for a knee replacement, and I helped her find that, organize that, so she didn't know where to start. So I can help in very little ways, or I can help in very large ways with transitions into retirement living and crisis advocating through the healthcare system and navigation.
Hi, my name is Irene from 360 Downsizing. I'm a certified relocation and transition specialist for seniors. I assist with packing, moving, unpacking, to preparing the home for market by fixing what's broken. We do the staging, and I can also help out clear contents of a home with online auctions or consignment and donations.
Thanks, Irene. I could just vouch for Irene. We did a transaction together just last month, and you'd be surprised how quickly a house can be emptied of all the contents and make it painful, or painless, I guess, for the sellers. So if it's something that you have some interest in or some need to, then don't hesitate to speak with Irene. Thank you. We'll get back to you, Neela, in a minute. She's our guest of honor today. Not here, and just want to acknowledge, we also have Parkland Retirement Residences. It's a new retirement complex in Ancaster, just opening in the fall, so they're going through a lot of busy times there. And Chartwell is again a retirement homes in Oakville. Unfortunately, they're not able to join us today. We got missing Qualicare. Sorry, Jerry Tzia was here. Unfortunately, he had to step out. It's a home care company. Again, all the home care companies and retirement homes, there are several options in the community for you to choose from, and it's always around what is the right fit for you. So it's worth exploring several just to find what's right. Senior Care Access is also a company that provides transition services, and they also have an online database of senior housing. I think I've got everybody? Yep, perfect. Just want to also acknowledge Lisa and Ina. They're here every month, and they help me a lot to get everybody settled and do things to keep us organized, so thanks very much. Appreciate it. So just before we get started, just a big announcement. So next month, I just want to be clear, next month in April, we're not going to get together this way between 1:30 and 3, but we're having, and it's called the Howard Senior Speaker Series Living Well Expo. So in this room, you'll find over 30 exhibitors or service providers, support services, educational partners, along with others. So it's your chance to come and learn and speak to these people, to see what they're all about, to see how they can help you, and just get just become better equipped as to what services are involved, what there is in the community for you. The hours will be 11 to 3, again, in this room. You're welcome to come anytime during that time and stay as long as you want. Also, we're going to have, Irene will be doing 3 presentations. They will all be the same. They'll be at 11:15, 12:30, and 1:45. So you're going to ask that if you're interested in those, that you sign up. These sessions are going to be down the hall in the Fireside Lounge. So the room capacity there is much smaller than this. So I have to keep an eye on how many people we accommodate there, but you have 3 options. And Irene was supposed to be with us last November for a presentation. I know we disappointed a lot of people when she wasn't here. She had a family emergency. So this is our way to hopefully get that information to you. In addition, we have Minty, Gold, and Silver, who will be here, and they'll have an opportunity to evaluate your broken jewelry pieces, any kind of silver and gold. What they do is they purchase it from you based on weight, and I understand that those products are melted down. It goes like the silver goes back to the mint it's all repurposed. So they will be here as well. I know we've got some other things that people are talking that they're going to contribute to as well, but I just can't share that with you. But I just want to be clear that if you do intend to come to one of the sessions that Irene is doing, we really do need your name. The girls at the Lisa and Ida have a list, so please do sign up for the session that suits the time frame for you. Okay, and just also a few housekeeping tips before we start. Again, for everyone that's been here many times over, you know the drill. Please turn your phones off or down, as I said. As I say that, just to minimize the disruptions. We'll take the questions at the end. We've got some notepads and pens to take notes of your questions. And if you can't hear, please do speak up. There's spots in the front. That's why they're here, but we want everybody to go away not saying I couldn't hear anything, it was a waste of time. We want your time here to be worthwhile. So here we are with our topic today. So Neela White is also one of our educational partners. And she presented for us July 2023, and she gave us a very enlightening presentation at that time called The Silent Worry. And if you weren't here for that session, you'll be able to catch it on the video replay. On the speaker series website, there's a tab called Past Events, and you can just scroll down and you'll find the presentation that she did. Today, we're going to address a topic that we've not covered yet, and your children and their well-being. So it happens just to coincide with the uncertainty and the apprehension that we're seeing in the world around us today. When all of us perhaps thought that things are pretty stable, nothing can change, we've all learned the last couple of weeks that things can change on a dime. So planning for your longevity and for your children's longevity is especially important today, given how our life expectancy is increasing and as costs of care, and as we're seeing now, things are out of our control and they can and do change, and not always for the better. Helping your adult children create a comprehensive plan for their own aging journey will allow them to see how they can help remain independent and financially secure in later years. So Neela is a partner and co-founder of Blue Wing Advisory Group, Raymond James Limited, with over 28 years in the financial industry. She provides inclusive wealth management services as an aging specialist and senior portfolio manager. Neela holds degrees in psychology, gerontology, and thanatology, and certifications including certified professional consultant on aging, elder planning counselor, and certified executive advisor. She's also a certified patient navigator and a certified dementia care provider with training in MAID and death doula services. Neela is an active speaker on caregiving, aging, and healthcare navigation. She participates in conferences, panels, media interviews, podcasts, and educational events. She's been featured in various industry publications, is a member and presenter for the Canadian Securities Institute, and was a participant in their Financial Health Seniors Initiative. She's frequently a guest on BNN Bloomberg TV. Neela created the educational webinar series, The Open Dialogue on Aging, and authors the newsletter Perspectives on Longevity. She's currently working on a book for caregivers, care recipients, and the sandwich generation. I'd also like to note that Neela was the recipient of the 2024 Raymond James Woman of Distinction Award. Congratulations, Neela. Each year, Raymond James honors women financial advisors who demonstrate exceptional leadership in serving their clients and the community, as well as supporting the professional growth of women in the financial service industry. So we're definitely in good hands today. Welcome to Neela.
Thank you for that. So I apologize for the long bio. That's what happens when you try to get into med school about 2 to 3 times and you're turned down. You'll get every other designation and acknowledgement there is except for that. So thank you all for attending today, and the conversation today is going to be a little bit different, and it's why your children should plan for their longevity. So obviously, as Marian stated, what we're seeing today and in the last couple of weeks is news is affecting the stock market hour by hour. Certainly, this can be prolonged or it can be quite short. Right now, it's looking like it's prolonged, in which case, what you thought your kids could do for you as caregivers, or what they themselves think that their children, which may be your grandchildren, can do as their caregivers, might very well be changing just based on today's current economic situation, outside of what the trajectory of the numbers is suggesting today. So with that, I'm going to start, and can everyone still hear me? Okay. So right now in Ontario, 4 million people identify as caregivers. The reason why that number may seem so low to everyone is it's the word identify. So when the survey was done by the Ontario Caregiver Organization, it's people who actually said, hey, going out and buying mom and dad's groceries, taking them to the doctors, picking up the prescription. I call that an extra duty. I'm calling myself a caregiver. There were other people who did not and could not identify as a caregiver because they felt, as a son, as a daughter, that's my duty and that's my obligation to my mom and dad who raised me. So there's this differentiation of what and who do we call a caregiver. Essentially, anyone who's doing a task for somebody else, whether it's children, raising young families, or parents, grandparents, are acting as a caregiver role. So right now, when we look at the numbers, 4 million are caregivers. 51% of those caregivers are in the sandwich generation. That means they're taking care of young families, so your grandchildren, and they're also helping out with their parents. One of the things that the bio didn't mention, as far as I go, is my first career actually started in long-term care, so that's where my background in geriatrics and thanatology come from. But I was also a caregiver to my mom and dad for 10 years of my life. My dad had pancreatic cancer and he survived for 18 months and he was co-diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. My mom had an accident which left her disabled, a 5-time cancer survivor, and in the last 3 months of her life, she was diagnosed with rapid onset dementia and died. So I do know from where I'm coming from and the importance of letting our generation know what the probability and possibility is as far as trajectory and as far as expenses, because this can certainly erode any well-crafted financial plan outside of any market condition that we're seeing today. 49% of care recipients actually live with their caregivers, so that tends to be moms and dads living with their children. And 37 live on their own, so that means kids or services come in to help out. So I'm just gonna, I can't see because of the light, sorry about that. 67% of caregivers are employed and balancing work with their caregiving responsibilities. The age of the caregiver tends to be 45 to 64 years old. So when you think that a caregiving responsibility can be 10 hours or more a week, how does a 40-hour work week become balanced? And what employers are currently seeing right now is that people are trying to balance being caregivers, but at the same time, they're coming to work, showing up to work with something called presenteeism. And what that is basically sitting there, you're present, but you're absent. So you're unable to function in the job due to stress or distress, which is prolonged stress. By 2030, unpaid caregivers in Ontario, it's going to increase by 50% to 6.5 million people. The problem with that number right now is birth rates in Ontario are still going down. So this is a trajectory of number which the compensation has to come from private care or government-funded services. And we're all aware, especially after last month's presentation, what the situation is right now with government-funded care. There's a shortage of staff, there's a shortage of hours. So when we look at planning, 94% of prospective caregivers actually believe that planning was very important in the caregiving process. However, less than half of them have planned for that process. And that's both from a job perspective and that's financially. So when you think of your children who are older or boomer adults right now, what planning have they spoken to you about for their own well-being and their own welfare, especially if they're able to say, oh, mom and dad, I recommend to you that you start looking at retirement homes in the area, start looking at what your budget is. Have they themselves already done that as well and looked at it with their younger children, if the children are going to be part of the plan? Current caregivers out of pocket currently spend about $640 a month on care. The trajectory right now, and 5% of those people are actually spending $2,000 or more of care. One of the stats that the study from the Ontario Caregiver Organization came up with is, in 5 years, there's going to be an expected 2.7 million needed more caregivers, that's family caregivers, of which those caregivers said that they will not and they cannot be a caregiver to their parents. And it was based on their lack of confidence in being a caregiver, the financial stability of taking time out of their working life to become a caregiver, and also the impact emotionally and physically on their lifestyle. So when you think of your adult children and you think about them raising a family right now, what happens when the care need arises, but their son or daughter has a hockey game, has the finals, and their demand is elsewhere? Do they have the budget to put in place something to help out? And the budget is the key. Early planning, we all know, reduces stress and anxiety. Something that's showing up right now on a higher scale is what's called distress. Distress, as I mentioned before, is prolonged and enduring stress. So when you're a caregiver for a very long period of time, it does impact all areas of your life. And for those of us who have been caregivers, we can attest to that. And what eventually happens is it starts affecting your whole well-being, which creates distress. So when we talk about the role of a caregiver, and this was part of the issue that people had of being able to say, I'm not just a daughter, but I'm a caregiver as well. These were the tasks that they were responsible for. So when you take a look at the tasks that are on the board, those are just, for the most part, everyday normal things we ourselves do in our lives. But when you look at that, and the expectation is that your adult children are going to help you with those tasks. When we look at an idea of transportation, taking you to a doctor's appointment, taking you to the pharmacy, taking you to the grocery, is that going to impact their employment? Do they have a flexible enough job where they can say, I'm going to take an hour, I'm going to take my lunch, and I'm going to be able to help you out? So one of the things adult children, when we're discussing retirement planning with our clients' adult children, these are the conversations that we're having because it has to be part of the retirement plan. Right now, current caregiver contributions in Ontario. So as we mentioned, there's 4 million caregivers, and that should say in Ontario, they're actually providing 75 to 80% of the care. So when you think the number of caregivers are reducing every year, what happens to the backbone of the healthcare system? What are we seeing right now? And if what we're seeing right now is alarming, the trajectory is continuing just because of the shortages with staff that they're seeing right now. 76% of caregivers perform tasks typically performed by a nurse or a PSW, which is a personal support worker. And they're doing this, for the most part, untrained. Caregivers contribute around $97 billion to the care economy. That's unpaid caregiving jobs. So again, we see if there's a reduction in the amount of people who can provide care, what again happens to the healthcare economy? Before inflation became a topic of interest in 2022 and 2023, the two things that were moving up constantly regardless of inflation was healthcare and personal services. I just wanted to show you how the cost of long-term care has increased. So for those of you who remember last month's presentation, public long-term care is co-funded by the Ministry of Long-Term Care. So we pay a portion, the government pays a portion. So when we look at the cost of a private room, so one person in a room, that was $2,700 in 2020. In July of 2024, it went up to $2,900. So that in itself is about a 7% increase in cost, and this is flat. So it's not as if you go to a nursing home in Mississauga, a nursing home in Whitby. The pricing would be the same. It is set by the government, and it's changed usually every year in and around July. Also, I'm not going to name the PSW firm that I got this information from. So the private care, so again, as we discussed last month, there's a certain portion of hours that you can get when you need assistance, and that's provided through OHIP once an assessment is done. If you need extra care, it's coming out of pocket. For the firm that I got the data from, if you book weekly, 4 to 12 hours a week, the cost of the care per hour is $40.25. If you need care longer term, 71 hours a week, the cost goes down to $35. But you can see just by those numbers alone how that's going to very quickly add up. If you require overnight care, so that's just basically somebody making sure that the person who's sleeping is safe, is dry, if they need any nighttime reminders for meds, or anything else like that, they are there. That's $390 overnight. If you require nursing services, if it's a care call, so that's a private care call, it's $59 an hour. And if it's private duty nurse, as in she needs to come in because medication or IV needs to be changed, medication, catheter, bag drainage, that would be $56 an hour out of pocket. If you are unable to get the care through OHIP, through Ontario Health at Home. That is the name for it right now, right? Ontario Health at Home? Okay. So when they surveyed current caregivers, and they wanted to know, how did it go? How did you feel this job was? Was it what you expected was gonna happen? As you can see, 36% were unprepared for the impact on their ability to work. 36% were unprepared for the financial impact on their lives. 38% were unprepared for the time that was required. And 44% were unprepared for the overall impact. So when you look at those sorts of incongruencies between what I think I know about the job and what I feel once I'm actually doing it, it's reflected in the numbers, and this is hard data that was done through past caregivers. Over half of seniors wait for long-term care, at least 126 days to 2.5 years. Anecdotally, for some of the groups I'm part of, I've heard anywhere from 2 to 5 years, depending on the home that you're waiting for. So that is, again, I'm talking about long-term care, not retirement homes, okay? So publicly funded care. Ontario right now needs about 30,000 new beds to accommodate the care that's needed for the people. So when we think about, this is for us currently right now, what happens when our children, our adult children, reach 65, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90? Where do the beds come from? Because right now, there's about 625 to 27 registered long-term care facilities with 76,000 beds. All the beds are at capacity, and the wait list in Ontario right now is 48,000 people long. The interesting thing about the wait list is pre-COVID and during COVID, they had thought that the wait list would be reduced just because the majority of the deaths happened with seniors and within long-term care settings. The number in and around when the pandemic started, so let's call that in around 2019, actually I think it was 5 years ago, was it not? 5 years ago yesterday. The wait list was about 42,000 people long, and today we're at 48,000. So you can see how the wait times are going to continue to increase, and right now there's not enough facilities coming online. In which case, kids, adult children, need to make sure that they are budgeting for care if they want to age in place. which is what usually tends to be the stopgap before you can get into a facility or a retirement home in case you need care, some care, before you need more care with your ADLs. By 2029, an additional 48,000 beds are going to be needed. So when you think about that, that's 4 years from now. In 4 years, I'll be 59 years old. I end up thinking, this is going to fall into my generation very quickly, and I'm the adult child that I'm talking about. What plans have I made to make sure that when I need care, that the budget is there for it, because I cannot rely on the government to provide for me. As I mentioned to you before, the wait list in Ontario right now is about 48,000 people long. To put that in perspective, that's the size of Orangeville, or Bradford, Orillia, Stratford. So imagine being one of those people in town waiting for at least 3 to 4 months. What is the 3 to 4 month plan? And if your adult children are part of that plan, have you spoken to them about what that stopgap plan is before you can get into a long-term care facility if you do need the help? That number has doubled in the past 10 years, in the past decade. And as I mentioned before, half of the Ontarians actually wait 6 months or more, and it tends to be closer to a year to 2 years, 2 to 5, depending on the location. Here was an interesting stat that came out in a study last year. In 2024, in long-term care facilities, there was a shortage of 80% of shifts for nurses, 53% for nurses, 80% for RPNs, and 40% for PSWs and dietary staff. So when we think of hands-on care, it tends to be more the PSW that does help you with the activities of daily living, and then the nurse ends up consulting or doing more when there's wound care or anything more specific and health related as opposed to activity related. By 2029, Ontario long-term care homes will need an additional 58,500 staffing just to be able to function. Right now, they're having trouble in a lot of facilities with administrative turnover. We know that there's a growing need for long-term care. The demand for long-term care is increasing by 38% over the next 10 years. The amount of people filling those spots right now is actually decreasing. By 2029, Ontario will need over 30,000 new long-term care beds. That was promised to be completed, both new and refurbished, by 2028. Right now, in the 30,000 bed mandate, there's been about 11,700 completed. When surveys were done on boomers' financial readiness, so that was a person at the upper age was 79 and at the lower age was, I think late 40s if I'm not mistaken. No. Late 40s? No? What's it? Sorry, can anybody remind me what the age group of the boomers is now? 61, sorry, that's it, sorry. I have so much data in my head right now, sorry. Okay, all right.
45, yeah, 1945.
Okay, with that age group, the boomers, 12% have seriously considered what their living arrangement's gonna be. So let's look at that adversely. 80% have not thought about what their living arrangements are gonna be. Most prefer to age at home. However, that number dropped from 72 to 56% when they were informed about what the cost would be to age in place for private care. And when they looked at home renovations, with the cost being between $5,000 and $40,000 to retrofit for any sort of disability, that number dropped even further. So again, it's educating your kids with what the costs are so they can make informed decisions about where and how they want to age. In 2022, it was the spring, the Financial Accountability Office came out with a report, and the projections were for 2028, 27, 28, that there was gonna be a deficit of 21 million for the healthcare, and that there would be by 2032, and that number has come down now, by 2032 that there would be an ultimate shortage of staff, both nurses and PSWs. By 2050, the number of family caregivers is gonna, the need for family caregivers is gonna rise by 120%, but the amount of people, so that's adult children, who are gonna be able to provide that care is gonna decrease by 30%. So again, for both my generation and for my parents' generation, you can see the importance and necessity to have these conversations with your kids. If they are going to be part of your plan, and two, because you are armed with the knowledge and possibly experiencing some of these costs and issues right now, you're able to inform your adult children that planning has to start at an earlier age. Because when it does start at an earlier age, you're more apt to be prepared for crisis. And we know, and this is simply from the market alone, it doesn't have to be a health crisis, it could be a market crisis, it could be an economic crisis. So there are lots and lots of myths and incorrect assumptions that are happening, and I hear them all the time when clients come in, which is part of the reason why I think it's so important to have these conversations, and they're not always comfortable. I'll be the first to say they're difficult, especially if proper planning has not been put in place and the budget is not there, they're not. But to not inform and you have the knowledge, I think also does not serve your client well, especially if you're acting as fiduciary. So when we look at some of the common assumptions, when we're young, we all assume that we're gonna remain healthy forever. We all think at the time when we're younger that the government's gonna provide for us. We don't understand what the economic reality is when the services start to come in and the cost comes in when we're aging. This is what we're seeing a lot of right now, which is also why I think this conversation with parents is really important with their children. We hear a lot, I don't have to do a lot of planning because my parents are gonna leave me money. We hear that a lot. We see adult children actually spending within their retirement plan what they think their inheritance is gonna be.
Wow.
So when we think about that, have we promised our children anything? Have we had that conversation with our kids that our funds are ours until the day we stop breathing, as opposed to them incorporating it as their financial plan? And the reason why I also think this is very important, we've had situations where possibly older parents have promised their children funds. The kids have put in that they're gonna purchase a cottage, a vacation boat, a vacation property. The parent gets sick, starts drawing down money to pay for care. The kids come in or give us a call, actually angry that we let the parents take the money and that was for their legacy. Well, let me tell you, I get glee setting people straight on that. Oftentimes, there's always the assumption that my children will take care of me. We do know that adult children now are saying that they won't do the job, they can't do the job, they feel uncomfortable doing the job. Also, there's also the assumption when we need long-term care, that bed is waiting just for me. So what happens to that retirement plan if you live too long, in which case you outlive your resources? What happens? What is the contingency plan? What happens if you live too long unwell? So when my mom broke her neck, she survived for 5 years, she was disabled, she lived with us. Between hours provided by CCAC and private care, before we died, we spent just under $500,000 on care. You can die too soon. You didn't make the proper plan, so you didn't update your will. You didn't update your powers of attorney. You've left chaos. And also, unfortunately, becoming sick and disabled, that can erode capital very, very quickly. We know that the cost of care is increasing. As I said, I'll be the first to admit that these are never comfortable conversations to have with anyone. But at the same time, I think it's so important because this is one of the things that catch people most off guard. So part of, I think, the importance is, can you feel what I'm saying? Can you hear what I feel? And I think as a caregiver, for me, it ends up being, I've been on both ends. I've done a job that I never thought I'd have to do. I saw the cost, and I saw what the maze is of the healthcare system, in which case I want everyone to know you have to prepare. This isn't just about retirement planning for your children. This is about healthcare planning. So family caregivers by 2050, as I mentioned, this is such an important stat for me, because there's going to be such a rise in the need and such a decrease in the providers. It's so incumbent on us to plan. So, conversations that we could be having with our kids. And one of the things I was asked when I've done this presentation before is, have I had this conversation, do I eat when I cook? Have I had this conversation with my adult child? Yes, I have. My daughter is 20. I've had these conversations with her. It is hard having it with a young person when you're talking about your own mortality or your own morbidity. But once a conversation was done, she actually processed it at some point and started asking questions. So the last time she was actually home for reading week, we went on a tour of Vistamere Retirement Home. And my daughter Laura, she ended up saying, hey Mom, if you and Dad sold this house when you were much older, would you come and live here? And I said, yes. She goes, can I still come and visit you? Yes. Can you still leave? Yes. So the fact that she was starting to ask questions about her dad and I, so I'm 55 and her dad's 55, it made me think, hey, drip on these conversations. That way it's not overwhelming and upsetting. It's just part of life. So when we have conversations with our kids, many people think that there'll still be enough time to put a plan in place once the crisis arises. The conversation that you can have with your kids or your loved ones, it doesn't have to be your children, it could be your person. If you were unable to make personal decisions or financial decisions for yourself, how do you think that would make you feel? If you could do something about it today to help yourself tomorrow, would you? Very rarely will you get someone who will say, no, I don't want to make it easier for myself tomorrow. Help kids get through their emotional hurdles. One of the things we encounter a lot is adult children don't want to talk about this because it ends up bringing up feelings of what's going to happen to my mom and dad. If you're talking to me about it, I'm 55, I'm 60, what's going to happen to mom and dad? And part of that discussion is we need to start talking and making it acceptable to talk about dying and death. It is part of our life. Again, personal disclosure, I'm high risk for cancer, high risk for breast cancer. I get screened every 6 months. I had to let my daughter know when she was 9 years old that this is what my trajectory might look like one day, and these are the plans that her father and I have put in place in case something should happen to me. It was a horrible conversation. When you're looking at a little face that looks just like yours, it becomes very emotional. But again, once it was done, now she understands why I do some of the things that I do from a health perspective, from a financial perspective. If I don't think about it, it's not going to happen. How many people here think about winning the lottery? How many people here plan what they're going to do with the money that they win from the lottery? Hasn't happened, sir. So it's one of those things, right? We know it's going to happen. Not thinking about it doesn't slow it down. It just makes you unprepared. It makes your kids unprepared. Conversation. Jane, you've worked so hard since you were a kid. Do you think that you should put some thoughts down on what you'd like to happen as you wait? Do you want to take a look at what your dad might plan is? Or I think it's easier to plan when you're not stressed out. Do you agree, Jane? Or daughter? Make time for the conversation. This is something we hear a lot about. Procrastination, it's human nature. I just don't have time to make a plan. One of the interesting things, my dad, who is now passed away, he died about 15 years ago now, he was a doctor. And one of his favorite sayings, he was a bit morose as well. He was a lot older than me as well when he had me, so I think he saw a lot in the hospital and stuff. he used to have an expression, you'll have all the time in the world to make a plan when you're 6 feet under. And the ICU is not the best place to make the most important decision of your life. And I remember the first time after he retired and he had a stroke, and I got a call from my mom at 3 in the morning saying, your father's in the hospital, he's had a stroke. I remember going into the ICU and seeing him, and that's the first thing that came through my mind. I am glad we didn't have the most important discussion with him while he was hooked up in ICU, because that may have been my lasting memory. So having a conversation with your son, Tony, I'm worried about the cost of healthcare as you age. I don't want you to outlive your money. Does that keep you up at night? And the other question is, does it keep your kids up at night? Tony, do you think your kids worry about you and Jane as you age and get older and what their part is in the plan? Rarely will somebody say, I don't think my kids worry about what happens when I get older. I worried about it all the time as my parents started getting older and when health issues started to arise. You could sort of see the path, and that's when I knew I had to create a plan for me, because I knew I was going to be the designated person. And I'm not sure why. I'm one of 3 children. I'm the youngest, but I think it had to do with my background in geriatrics and also working in long-term care. And there's always one child who will do everything, right? Dialoguing at home, this is another one we hear a lot. I don't want to talk about this. It becomes so emotional when I talk about this at home. We just stop talking about it now and we avoid it. Jane, I get it. This is emotional, even for your dad and I. We don't want you to lose your independence. When you come for dinner, why don't we write down a couple things? Why don't you take a look at Dad and my plan? And let's work something out together. Make it reasonable, make it slow, make it steady. And I'd just like to end with this. Who are you and where's your village? I think what all of us need to think about, us, our adult children, our grandchildren. When we think about support within aging, are we including them at that conversation? And if we do, can we consider that a gift of love to them by including them in one of the most important decisions you'll have in all of your life? Thank you.
Thank you for your talk. I wonder if you have any, well, my children are in their early 50s, lots of grandchildren. We've tried to convince them to get wills and powers of attorney. 2 of them are living in common law relationships. One is getting separated. And we gave them money a few years ago to get wills and powers of attorney. They haven't. So do you have any suggestions how we can do that?
Okay. So that's an interesting question. 50% of Canadians do not have wills. Right? So they're in that party that don't.
%of people have power of attorneys as well, so it's an even smaller number.
So I think if when I'm thinking about how I would approach it when we have clients and we bring them in meetings and they say they don't have a will, I think I look at it from the extreme version. What could happen if you don't have a will? Do you want the government making decisions for you? Do you want your assets going to someone you can't stand? And I know that actually sounds very brassy to say, but when an opportunity is there and it's a rational opportunity, do a will because it actually saves chaos in the end, especially from an administrative point of view, especially if you have assets. Presenting the harsh reality of what could go wrong without having a will becomes the opposite side of the conversation that we have. And the other thing we have done is we've actually brought in a lawyer to a family meeting. That way we're all at the table and we can address especially, sir, because you actually gave the money for them to do it, you gifted them money to get their affairs in order. The next thing you could do or try would be to say, hey, if I set up a meeting with a lawyer to do a will, would you come with me? And that way they could get prompted into doing it, because I think what happens is, outside of the whole procrastination issue, I think most people don't understand how bad it can get administratively and the fight for assets when there's no will in place. There's sometimes this assumption that if there's no will in place, it's just gonna trickle down the line as far as assets go. You have to look at what's blended family, you have to look at common law marriages without children. You have to look at, let's say there's no will and somebody dies and one child did everything. Do you want your children fighting in court because there's an equal division possibly? Or there's no will, in which case someone says, hey, I've banked 1,000 hours, I should get X more out of the will. Well, Dad didn't say that, there is no will, you don't know that that's what he wanted. So I think my best suggestion is, and you can actually Google like sort of horror stories that happen without having a will. And when I tend to bring stuff like up, I read an article. Can you believe that this person without a will, this is what happened? And people are stunned, and it promotes action sometimes. Yeah.
I also have lots of stories about people dying without a will too, if you want. I can email them to you.
Anyone else?
Thank you. A couple of points, just to this gentleman that just spoke. I found that bringing my children to a meeting with a financial advisor was a really good way to ease into the whole topic, and they could see the assets and all of that. Part two of my question, or questions and comment. First of all, I was overwhelmed by the data, but also fascinated with it. And that leads me to 2 points. One is that, is that data about the medical system, the healthcare providers, typical throughout Canada, or is it strictly to Ontario as part one?
It's typical throughout Canada. The reason why we're seeing a bit bigger numbers in Ontario is just because we have more population. There's population density, but this is similar in Canada and North America and globally.
Okay, well then you've answered my question.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes. So, and again, that is why these conversations, I think, are just so important as part of the retirement planning, part of the saving, part of everything. If this was just a Canadian issue, you'd say, okay, we can possibly direct change policy. This is actually a global phenomenon that's happening right now, and this wasn't spurred by COVID. It was antagonized by COVID. So when you think if this is global, this is going to be such a big issue by 2029 and 2030, that if what we think right now with the lack of healthcare hours, the lack of budget within communities to say, okay, well, I think I need 4 hours a day, and you're getting maybe 1 hour a week. When my mom was released from rehab, she was disabled, so she had contractures. She couldn't feed herself, dress herself, bathe herself, get herself out of bed. She was assessed when she was released from St. Joe's rehab that she would need 6 to 8 hours a day care. When at the time it was called CCAC, when CCAC came and they assessed her, because she was living with me, they gave her 3 hours a week. So when any of you were wondering how could the bill have risen that much, we had to supplement while she was aging in place in a nanny suite, a granny suite at our house. We had to supplement it with private care. The only reason why I was able to make that decision, which was in accordance with what she wanted, was Mom and Dad were very, very transparent with us about what their budget was, with what their assets were, and what their wishes were. So based on all of those things, I was able to say the budget was there, this is what they want, and it was one of those situations. Once the person's released, they are your responsibility. So it wasn't, oh hey, look, I got less hours than I thought, I'm sending you back until we can get more from or through the government. Yeah, so we ended up contracting private services for the daytime, and I was the overnight care. That's it. Oh, there's- I'm just grateful that no one's asking me about the stock market.
No, I won't ask you about the stock market, nobody wants to look at that. Two things, when that gentleman talked about giving his children money, what I did, I went to my lawyer and I got a gift certificate for the will and the power of attorney and the power of care. He'd never seen it, it was Greg Brecken, and he'd never seen it before, and I gave it to my daughter and my son-in-law. Even though they're separated, they get along very well. And I gave it to them, we gave it to them maybe 5-6 years ago. They finally did it about 2 years ago and went and did it. The other thing is, I made a death book. And it's a book with everything. I made it up for my daughter, she's got it now. I indexed everything, how the bills are paid, how many credit cards, what's in my wallet, everything. From the minute I die to who she has to determine who she has to contact, like the pension and all that.
Yeah.
She's got it, she hasn't gotten back to me yet. I know it's quite a lot, but I said to her, take a look at it, and then we'll revise it.
Excellent, excellent. So when I hear something like that, it makes me so happy, because what tends to happen is when they're presented with a death book, they say, hey, if mom can do it, I can do it, I should do something similar. Even if it's a smaller version, it gets people started as life becomes more complicated to start documenting stuff. I do have a question for you. So I think that gift certificates is an awesome idea, because sometimes cash becomes, hey, there's a new iPhone. I can write down some thoughts in the notes on my iPhone. So you said that about 5 years ago, you gave them the gift certificate, and they did it about 2 years ago. So that means there was a lapse of 3 years where they did nothing. And forgive me for asking, was that as a result of them being separated and figure things out? Or was there a procrastination moment where they said, hey, I'm too young, I don't want to do this, this is upsetting?
No, they'd already been separated. They were married 5 years and been separated 10. But they get along really well. They just can't live together. No, we just kept saying, have you done it? Have you done it? So I kept bugging them, and finally they did it. And they both went to the same lawyer. They both did it. That's how well they get along. They have one child. So I just didn't let up.
Good job, Mom. Good job. I think that's a great idea. I think, sorry, getting back then to the question, I think maybe when we're thinking about how to help our kids through that procrastination hurdle, it's being innovative and creative. And that procrastination hurdle is actually increasing generationally. Like when I look at my 20-year-old daughter, oh mom, there's lots of time, Mom. Why are you in such a rush, Mom? And it does change, right? So I think it's part of it is being consistent on accountability. Sorry, there was another question. Okay.
Yes, I noticed one of your credentials was in thanatology. Never heard that word. What is it?
The study of death and dying and the rituals associated with it. And part of the reason why I actually took the course was because I've always actually wondered why people don't plan, what stops them. Is it cultural, is it religious, is it personal, is it spiritual? And it was trying to get a better understanding of how to help my clients get through the hurdles of not wanting to plan and being sensitive to where they're coming from. I think sometimes it's hard to have that sensitivity. I mean, I was brought up in a family of doctors, so death and dying was a constant part of the conversation. So I'm very comfortable talking about end of life and dying. However, when my daughter one day asked me about the birds and bees, I should Dad. So everybody has their a conversation that they find easy, that somebody else finds hard. And for me, that was one of them. And for me, I just go straight at it. Like, why not do it? These are all the bad things that can happen. I always use my mom and dad as examples. I use myself as an example because I'm high risk, because dementia runs in our family, because cancer runs in our family. So my clients are aware of that, in which case I have to be able to do everything that I say and that I advise them to do. I need to be able to say I did it as well. Didn't like all of it, but I did it. Yes?
I've got the mic. just an adjunct to the lady in the front about her book on death. I've done something similar. I just entitled it Information Upon Death. But what's really key is to look at it annually and update it, and then actually write down update, because cars get changed, things get dropped. But included everything from passwords to subscriptions to what have you as the go-to document. And then I sent that document to, I only have one daughter, and she'll be 30 in July, but 2 years ago, to the point of getting a will, that was part of her Christmas present. So off we went, even though she doesn't have any property, but she does work for the government, and there's stuff, right? So there's different ways to handle it, but it was just non-negotiable. It needed to be done, and there you go.
Good job. I love hearing stories like that.
At what stage do you advocate couples and their parents talking about, or the children rather, talking about end of life, for instance, like maid and so on? Is it too soon to start talking, years ahead, or at the last minute?
So from a personal point of view, no, I don't think it's ever too early. I think the earlier you have these conversations with your children, the more they become comfortable with what your wishes are, what your values are, what your wants are. The last thing anyone would want is to not have that conversation with their child. Then the moment comes and they say to the doctor, no, Mom never talked to me about that, that's not what Mom wanted. Or if you have the conversation with only one of multiple children, that's not what Mom wanted, that's what she said to me, and there becomes a fight. I would say if that is something that you hold as a core value, and what you value as your right to choose at end of life, then have that conversation. I've had that conversation with my daughter since she was 16, and her father started having that conversation along with mine when she was about 18. And she can more take in the, okay, this is what they want, I get that they're getting older, I saw grandma die. And we actually started the conversation when the day before my mom died, my daughter and I went to go see her. And she was just staring, and it's like, is grandma gonna die? Yes, she'll probably die within about 24 hours. Lauren, if this was me, this is what I would like. This is what I'd like you to do. And this is how I'd like you to advocate for me. You may not agree with what I want, but I want it, you're my advocate. That's it. So, any age.
I'm just gonna make a comment too, if that's okay. So when I was 40, again, practice what you preach, and I have a wish to not be cremated, but to be buried. I bought my plot at 40, and my son was in the van, and he was 9, and I did all the paperwork and came into the van, and he goes, Mommy, what were you doing at the cemetery? Because he was parked in the van, waiting. And I said, oh, I just bought plots for my casket, and he goes, oh, can you get me one too? So it doesn't have to be scary, and I agree, the earlier you talk about your wishes, the better for everybody. Don't get closest. We'll get you back closer.
What advice have you got with regards to choosing your executors, and what are their duties, and what is their timeline to get things completed?
Okay, so choosing an executor, my recommendation, Freddie, so when we have meetings with our clients, it doesn't necessarily have to be your children. By default, people tend to choose their children because they also tend to be the beneficiaries. However, in my opinion, you never want to choose an executor that had no financial acumen, that had a financial spending issue, that had an addiction issue, because when it comes to administering the estate, they can end up making, through the will, they can still end up making bad decisions and eroding that estate value. So that's the first thing. Their duties, it's everything. It's property, both physical and digital. It's filing the papers with the government. It's going through probate with the will. It's making sure the tax return is done, making sure that they don't pay out to the beneficiaries ahead of time, because being an executor, remember, there's personal liability. So if you said an estate was $1 million and you paid out all $1 million to the beneficiaries, and let's say you do the estate return and there's a tax bill owing of $200,000, if they can't get the money back from the beneficiary, the executor is personally liable. You can actually get insurance, executor insurance, that protects you. It's not very common, not very popular, and most people are shocked when they hear there's personal liability accepting executorship. And timeline, Sarah?
So 1.5 years for a simple estate, and we have a few that are at the 10-year mark. So it just really depends on what's involved. If your beneficiaries are estranged, then it's more difficult because you have to be able to find beneficiaries for percentages of their estates. So it just depends on your situation.
My wife and I decided what would happen when we pass on. And I'm sure that Smiths will look after reports.
In your experience, have you found that there's a difference dealing with daughters versus sons?
Yes.
I only have sons.
Yes.
That move.
You know, in our experience, and even from counseling groups that I've led and stuff like that, it tends to be, daughters tend to be more flexible, and because they also still tend to be primary caregiver, there's a greater acceptance and understanding for the job involved. When we deal with men, sons, they tend to have more of a denial factor that mom or dad are dying, mom and dad are sick. They're more pragmatic about things and less nurturing about things. So yes, I have found that there's a total difference. I find it helps, and this may not always be a good thing depending on the relationship between, you know, your son and possible girlfriend or partner. Sometimes it helps to bring in the partner, because within the relationship, the partner is sometimes able to help out the son, the male, a bit better in understanding what the parents are trying to get at. So yes, I do, ultimately yes, there is a difference between men and women, yes.
Just a couple of comments on some things that have been said. So there was a senior series about estates in detail a while ago. So you can check out the recording on empoweredseniors.ca. So I do encourage you, if you're looking at that. Also, because of the expo next month, you'll have a good chance to talk to people directly about some of these issues. And when you were talking about maid, I just have an example for you. So a good friend of mine's mother, a number of years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, she's in her late 60s, told her family if she ever was incapacitated mentally, like if she got dementia or something like that, she would want maid. And she explained it to her kids, and they learned about it together, and while they personally were a little bit shocked about it, they were like, okay, we'll respect you. This person just got diagnosed with early stage Alzheimer's at 68. And now the adult children are dealing with the emotions of the Alzheimer's, but not dealing with the emotion of maid, because they had already addressed that in a great conversation. And it's changed the way they're even thinking about the long-term care, because this person does not want to go into a care home. So more money can be spent up front and doing other things for the care now, because she's unequivocal about the fact that she wants maid. So those early discussions made a huge impact. So I do highly recommend that if you are interested in that.
Thank you for sharing that.
I'm interested on behalf of one of my children, how do you go about getting the insurance if you're an executor and didn't expect to be?
Okay, yeah, you know what? For the most part, whoever their insurance provider is, they can contact them, say, I already have a house policy, a car policy, whatever. Do you offer executor insurance? Yeah. And an executor bond. especially if they're executor and there's cross-border assets, they would need the insurance and the bond. Yeah.
First of all, kudos to Sarah because she helped us with our family. She's excellent.
Thanks.
You don't have to remember me. But anyways, my question revolves around the death book that you mentioned. That is something I haven't done. I have a file, I have where things are important. How did you go about that? Is something you researched yourself? What you decided to want to go into it? I'm open to any kind of, advice. It's something I'd like to do.
Is there a resource available?
Yeah.
There's a book, yeah, it's called I'm Dead Now What? Actually, at the expo, I'll bring a copy as my door prize. So there you go, just a plug for the expo.
I'm dead now what? Okay.
Hi, I just want to tell you that a lot of people have the idea that if you have a power of attorney, that they can take care of things when you're dead. No, the power of attorney dies when you die. So you must have a will. I worked with the government for a long time. That's what we did. We processed wills and stuff. If you have a will, the process goes much quicker. You're looking maybe 3 months. If you don't have a will, it can be up to a year to 2 years. The government took away the staff. We had 4 that used to do this. Now they've got 1. So that's something you have to really, really think about. Get a will. I cannot stress that enough. Also, I wrote them down, I'm sorry. If you get the chance to buy a plot now or the box for the cremation, do it. Because the prices go up every year and it costs a fortune. And,
Good advice. Yeah, so if you pre-plan a funeral, it is inflation protected. It's one of the costs that go up every single year.
I just wanted to say we have our 3 children as executors. They all get along really, really well, as do their spouses. But the one son now resides in the US. So the lawyer has advised that once I pass, they get him to sign off. And then things will run much smoother.
Correct. It's very, very, very difficult to have a cross-border executor. Yes.
Sorry.
Sarah, could you tell us some of your nightmares?
Sure, yeah. So I am speaking in June, by the way, so come to the June expo, or the event. I did actually just sit with a gentleman who said, his dad said, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. And the son said to me that he went back to his dad and said, well, the bridge is now burning. So basically, I think just to see exactly what she was saying is, there's an assumption that things are just gonna run smoothly. So what I'm thinking about is, there's a gentleman in Toronto, he had a home. He died suddenly on vacation at 62. Okay, I'll move over here. Did not have a will, had 2 people living in his home, so just buddies, right? And because he didn't have a will, there's something called next of kin, kind of like having to sign off if you live in another country. So this gentleman had a homeless brother and another brother in jail. The government standard says those 2 gentlemen are next of kin. The government decides, right? We're talking about the government gets to decide. Well, his best friend is his cousin who lived in Grimsby, Ontario, and she calls me and she says, how do I become the estate administrator after the fact? And I said, well, it's very difficult because basically you need to find these other 2 brothers and get them to sign off as next of kin, and then you hire a lawyer, and then you have to go to court and say why you want to be the estate administrator. It doesn't automatically go to the person that you want it to go to. So that house in Toronto is still lived in by these buddies, No one has access to the home to sell it because they're still waiting on these government paperworks to be signed, and it has been a few years now, and it's still waiting. So that's just one example where, yes, he had a house, so he has an asset, but this poor cousin, we could help with the funeral, but that's about all we could really do. Like, everything else is going through lawyers. The way I describe it is, it's a lot cheaper to get a will before you pass away than to try to hire a lawyer who has to then investigate the lineage to figure it out. Another one was no children, no parents, single person. All their siblings were older with dementia in nursing homes all across Canada. And so they thought their niece, who lives nearby, who helps with groceries and all of that, would just automatically be the next of kin because they're their power of attorney. They've been helping them pay all their bills. It doesn't work like that. You have to have all those siblings sign off as next of kin. And so, unfortunately, but fortunately for Smiths, we hold the person in our care until we can have everything organized. So, but those are just two examples I can think of that happened recently. So, yeah, everyone needs a will, I think, is the main point.
You don't have to give me a mic, I've got a good voice. This is one thing that's very important. You can start now to talk to your funeral homes, to start planning, even though you can't maybe afford the amount of money that it shows. It's really, really handy because my mother was very strange. She had 3 husbands and wanted to be buried with 2 of them. So we had to split her ashes. And my sister was absolutely, this was not gonna happen. We went to the funeral home had it there written down as to how my mother wanted it to be, 2 different graves. And that's how we managed to save a big family fight. And also, my mom got what she wanted. And it's really important. These guys are wonderful.
Yeah.
I can't say enough about them.
I had an experience recently where I wanted to go to the bank to get my children, to have my children have the right to get into my account. And so they said, well, bring your power of attorney, which I brought both of them, the one for property and the one for care. But when I brought it, it was dated 2009, and they said, you have to get your lawyer or someone to stamp it, that it's, you know, the current copy. So it has to be valid for two years.
There's, I won't name the bank, there's 2 out of the large 5 banks that have rejected powers of attorney for property when we've been dealing with them. And the power of attorney was 7 years old and they rejected it.
I can just add to that, there's some power of attorney, so if you're selling a property and you have a power of attorney, some lawyers won't even won't accept them if they are been done online and they haven't been done in person with the lawyer. So the online stuff is easy to do, but may not be practical.
So I think that just sort of emphasizes the point that it's great and so important to get these documents done, but it's also equally important to keep them updated. Because the last thing you want is there's incapacity and your child has a document, goes to the bank, tries to set things up on your behalf, and they're unable to negotiate on your behalf and act as agent.
Will there be a lawyer at the expo?
Not a lawyer, but
Debbie Stanley will be here from ETP Canada, so it's an estate trustee. What does the P stand for? Planner. Trust estate planner. So she will be here. She had a presentation as well, I think last year sometime. That is also online. So a lot of the things that we were talking about today, you can look back at some of the presentations from the past, and you'll find lots of information. You'll be able to stay occupied, not having to watch Netflix. You can watch for hours on end.
I have a question regarding people on either side of the ocean. Both of my children are over 50. My oldest boy lives in Britain. I live here. In Britain, I have a will that states everything is to be divided between both my children, and my will on this side essentially says exactly the same thing. Now, you made a comment about you can't transverse between the two countries.
So what
I also have in my will states that my ashes have to go back to Britain. And again, the question is, how do we do that?
So from a brokerage point of view, the issue that we run into when it comes to cross-border or across the ocean executors, first, the rules for executorship when it comes to cross-border is different. So Canada says that the executor to provide executorship actually has to come here to provide the settling of that will and act as executor. The second thing is any brokerage or even bank, what they have to do is they have to go and validate those executors. So they would have to sign a bunch of documents to prove that they're who they say they are, who you've named. Your will in itself has to be probated to prove that those are the people that they are and that was your last will. So it becomes extremely difficult from a brokerage point of view to settle finances and do any transaction when the executor's foreign. We've had, so what we've done in the past is, we have an arm in England. We've assigned them the duty. That way the client can still be served, just to avoid that. Yeah, we've run into that for both Europe and the US.
And the question about cremated remains is you can have them go to another country. There's just extra documentation that has to happen. Yeah, a trip to Hawaii.
If it's a suitcase, yes.
Any other questions? I'll just comment too that one of our past presenters, Carly Hickey, she is from ACE, Advanced Care Planning as well, and so you were asking about the planning book or the death book. She's got a product as well, so she will be at the event next month. Be able to talk with her and speak with her about her and get some update from her. But are we ready to wrap up? Are we all done with our questions? So thank you so much, Neela. It was a great presentation once again. Oh, there's a disclaimer of your references. Once again, I've changed the image on this slide, but the message is the same every month. Plan ahead, don't procrastinate. It's easy to do. Don't need to talk about that. Thank you again to all our educational partners. They're all here. Don't run out. Feel free to come and talk with any of us. We're all here to help. And don't forget, Living Well Expo is next month in April. Change of scenery here. Okay? Thank you so very much.